Welcome to everyone who's just joining us. So we're going to go ahead and I've just said a few words about the new Games and International Law Teaching Network. And as I mentioned, our co-host is, of course, the wonderful people at the Games and Gaming Lab at the University of Glasgow, which is a really vibrant gaming community for those of you who aren't familiar with it, looking at everything ranging from tabletop board games, card games, 2D video games, and beyond. And really exciting conversations there also about the pedagogy underlying games and gaming. And so a really wonderful fit for this escape room conversation today. And so now that I've got everyone in from the wait room, what I'll do is I'll just briefly explain how the event will work. So we have our speakers and we've invited them to either speak about the educational escape room that they've designed or to give a demo or presentation of it. So some of them will be showing actual videos so you can see what the game, which might be an in-person game or a digital game or so on, so you can see what it looks like. And instead of having like a large overview about what educational escape rooms are, we're going to just go through the games as a way of sort of revealing what they can be, what they can do, what they can be used for. And then we're going to save the last 45 minutes to hour just for general conversation and crosstalk. And I know there are people in the audience who themselves are escape room designers. And then there will be people who have never even done an escape room and are just curious. And so I want to invite everyone from that whole range of skills and backgrounds to participate in the Q&A. And I will turn off the recording at that stage so everyone can feel free to share. And so without further ado, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to introduce you to our first presenters. Now, one of the presenters, there are actually three co-developers of the first game. That's Dr. Helen Hall, Professor Tom Lewis, and Professor Javier Garcia Oliva. And Javier isn't with us today, but Helen and Tom are presenting on his behalf. Some people in the audience might also be interested in reaching out to different game creators after the event, and I can also help connect you through emails and things like that if you want. So Professor Javier Garcia Oliva is the head of law at Manchester and a specialist in public and constitutional law. He did his undergraduate, postgrad, and doctoral studies at the University of Cadiz before moving to the UK, first to Cardiff and then Bangor universities, and then joining Manchester in 2011. He's particularly interested in human rights and the freedom of belief. Dr. Helen Hall is an associate professor of Nottingham Trent University and deputy director of the Center for Rights and Justice. Her research interests span human rights, law, and religion, belief, tort, family law, and legal history. Professor Tom Lewis has taught at Nottingham Trent University for many years, before which he practiced as a solicitor. He teaches and researches in the area of human rights and public law, in particular on freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief.
Thank you so much for everyone for participating. I'm really enthusiastic to hear all of the different presentations, and I'm sure there'll be some great insights in the Q&A. And just huge thanks again to Rebecca for making all of this happen. It's really appreciated. We're going to be kicking off and talking about some of the ways in which we've been using escape rooms in our respective universities and within particularly legal disciplines. I'm conscious that we've got a wide range of different people here. I'm not going to presume to try and come up with an authoritative definition of escape rooms. Suffice it to say, these are essentially a series of puzzles towards a particular goal. Traditionally, that was literally people locked in a room and they have to manage to solve various puzzles and problems in order to escape that situation. Sometimes that's the case now, sometimes it isn't. We have two different escape rooms that we are in the process of developing. And I'd like to talk about a very particular way in which we're trying to use these in terms of learning and learning outcomes. As I'm sure many people here will know, there are a plethora of different ways in which you might want to use an escape room setting in teaching. It can be an exercise, for instance, in problem solving, in encouraging critical thinking. in giving learners permission to think in different ways and to take a playful approach to what they're doing, which can be really helpful in firstly enabling people to do things they might not otherwise do, but also just in facilitating engagement in a comfortable, supportive learning atmosphere. It can also be a really valuable device for team building and many more things as well. However, our particular interest stemmed with a desire to get people to engage in narratives. I certainly come from a private law background. I still sometimes identify myself as a tort lawyer, even though I end up spending a lot of time writing about human rights and public law. And the relevance of that is the kind of law that I'm engaged with involves getting students to read cases, which are by definition a narrative, and also to think about broader narratives in the world. How do these kinds of stories play out if they're written on a really big and a really broad canvas? We're interested in part of our work in enabling people to develop empathy, to consider perspectives that are radically different from perhaps their own lived experience. And therefore, engaging with a narrative can be a powerful tool. Enabling someone to step into the shoes of a different person can be far more powerful than simply trying to tell them in a very sort of direct didactic way. So that was some of our underlying motivation. However, in our experiments with the particular use of escape rooms, yes. So one of the things that we found in some of our early experimentation was that obviously people have different approaches to doing escape rooms and playing them. And there can be a tendency for some people, at least, to get really enthusiastic about solving a series of problems, because we all like to win a game, don't we? Let's be brutally honest about that. And therefore, not be so invested actually in the narrative and the setting of the escape room. They just want to solve the puzzles and get out as quickly as possible. And clearly, that's not helpful if you're trying, part of it is trying to get them to think their way into a story. Equally, we found early on that there were some people who did that really naturally. And that was actually, especially people who played escape rooms before, even in quite a casual way, that was one of the things that they really enjoyed about the whole experience. So we were thinking, what can we do to try and enable people to be more inclined to use escape rooms in that way, bearing in mind human beings are always going to be individual and different, and you're never going to have a one size fits all kind of response or resolution. And any learning tool is going to suit some people more than others. However, we came up with two quite different ways of approaching this. One of them was with a project which we're currently doing with the University of Manchester. And it's around some bigger work that they're doing on a project called Carbon Ruins. And as you can probably surmise from that, it's about environmental issues, and particularly the legacy of fossil fuels and the way we have used them in the past and can carry on using them. And in this one, we actually set an escape room in a fantasy narrative. It's based on arguably the first work of science fiction ever written by a female author, and it was written in the 17th century, in 1666. A wonderful, fantastical world where she has talking polar bears and all kinds of wonderful species, and even a submarine. A long time before Jules Verne, there was a woman who was writing fictional stories about a submarine, which is amazing. And we use the world that she's created. Essentially, the premise of the escape room is that this world, like our world, has moved on in time. And there are, as comes out in Margaret Cavendish's narrative, this other world in another dimension are aware of what's going on Earth. And essentially, there are some proposals in their world to start making more use of fossil fuels. And there are protagonists within their world saying this is a really bad idea. Look what's happened on Earth. Look at what's happened with these people. So it's basically the narrative takes place within the setting of this alternative world. The participants in the escape room are effectively sent in as secret agents to try to get evidence about what carbon fuels and their impact is really like. Because one species, a species of giant dragon-like worms, have a big stake in the mining industry. And these worms are pushing fossil fuels, and we're fairly sure that they are trying to suppress evidence that they've already got about things happening on Earth. So effectively, they're burgling the office of the president of Wormland, but with a noble purpose. And this is set up in a way that role play is explicitly an important part, and people are encouraged to get into character. They're given a particular character, a very particular brief that's theirs, and that is made part and parcel, and there is some quite extensive reflection work done afterwards. In contrast, another different thing that we're developing is a murder mystery, and it's an escape room that has an element of climbing wall, which Tom is going to talk about in a second. But in this one, the engagement with narrative is quite different, because there are two things running in parallel. There are the conventional problems and puzzles that you get in an escape room, but what you get when you've managed to get to the end and solve one of the puzzles is to open a box which will give you some clues about the murder mystery that gradually unfolds. So as you complete the escape room, there is a narrative unfolding in parallel. And in order to play the game holistically, you have to engage with the narrative because it's half of what you're doing. And overall, this therefore allows engagement with the narrative. And although there is some follow-up material, it's considerably less extensive. And I'm now going to shift and let Tom, the climbing expert, speak a little bit more about the mental and physical elements of this.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thanks, Rebecca, as well for the invitation. It's very much appreciated to be amongst such august company. I'm a bit of an imposter. I'm not really an escape rooms person at all. I have been involved in developing board games for teaching, but not escape rooms. But I am a climber and a climbing instructor. And in a conversation with Helen, we decided that perhaps a climbing wall setting and the use of narratives, as she describes, might be a really interesting way of trying to sort of break down the kind of the schism that sometimes exists between the intellectual and the physical, and the duality between mind and body, and try and provide a more sort of holistic learning pedagogical experience. So the climbing wall escape room involves sort of mental challenges, puzzles, but also physical puzzles and challenges like tying knots, difficult climbing knots, and executing rock climbs in an indoor safe setting, which enable sort of clues to be discovered and clues to be found. And to give a brief sort of narrative, that the story involves a kind of murder mystery, or a disappearance mystery, perhaps, as Helen says, involving 100 years ago, a famous mountaineer who went missing on the remote sea cliffs of the west of Wales. And now, in the contemporary current day, a series of clues have come about, have been revealed, or a man has come forward who has kind of answers to how what actually happened to this famous mountaineer. Did he fall whilst climbing on the rocks? Was he pushed? Was it suicide? Was he murdered? And the clues will sort of, which can be sort of obtained through the physical challenges, lead to a series of answers. Now, the answer to the escape room, and I'm assuming no one here is going to actually do it, so I'll give the game away. It involves a series of letters and police reports from the time, which ultimately lead to the conclusion that he wasn't murdered, he didn't fall, it wasn't suicide. Actually, he was a gay man. And in order, in 1924, Britain, to live a life according to his own autonomy, he had to go into hiding and leave the country. So it brings forward in a very powerful, resonant way, an effective way, the problem of or the issue of essentially human rights, gay rights, and major shifts in the law in that regard, and also perhaps raises issues about gay rights in the rest of the world in contemporary society. So it tries to blend the physical, the mental, and the emotional and affective, because no one was going to see that coming. So yeah, that's the kind of, that's it. That's the shtick, really. I think I'm probably out of time. I'll stop.
That's amazing. Thank you. And Helen, did you want to add any last remarks, or is that it for you guys?
No, thank you for having us. That's a wrap.
Well, that's wonderful. I think there'll be many questions and lots of engagement around both of those games. Thank you both. All right. So next we have Matthias Hecken. And actually, I will let him introduce himself because he has some wonderful slides. And also, as we were joking earlier, there are some German words involved that I am miserable at pronouncing. So I'm going to defer to Matthias here. So I'll pass it over. Matthias, go for it. And your share screen is working.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me today. And indeed, I have a second slide here where I quickly introduce myself. Well, that's me. As you can probably hear, I'm not English speaking, native speaking. I'm from Germany, born 1982. And I originally have a master in industrial engineering and management. Yet in 2018, I shifted my career to educational games, to game development, and founded not only Welt da draußen a few years ago, but mainly, and what we're talking about today, the Lion of Münster, or in German, der Löwe von Münster, which is an educational escape room, a real construction. We're not talking about digital formats here, but it's a real escape room that we bring to schools. I will talk about that, and it's focusing on German history, civil courage in the present time, but my career a little bit. I also worked as a gamification producer in a Berlin agency, which is doing gamification professionally, which I'm doing also right now. I'm self-employed, and now I'm talking about Löwe von Münster. Yeah, I'll give you some background. It's a little bit tough to talk about this right now, but we need it because the escape room is about German history and about resistance by church, by a bishop in 1941. And what we're talking about here as a background is the so-called euthanasia. I hope it's pronounced correctly. Euthanasia is one of the murder programs by the National Socialists. And in their view, these humans were unworthy of life. They only cost the state money, so they murdered them in a murder program. I'm sorry that some of the posters, some of the slides, the originals here, that they're in German. Maybe you can translate it later on. It's really propaganda by the Nazi regime. And also what you can see here is that one of the Nazi ministers, Goebbels, wrote in his diary, "It is intolerable that hundreds of thousands of people who are completely unsuited to practical life are dragged along during a war." If I explain that to students where we have set up the escape room, that's also sometimes a moment of silence, because you really see what this guy wrote in his diary and how these people were thinking about human beings. But that's the motivation behind those murder programs. And now we're coming to Clemens August Graf von Galen. He was a bishop of the Diocese of Münster in 1941, actually from 1933 on till 1946. And he dared to publicly criticize the Nazi regime. He revolted against it, and he just held sermons. He talked about this euthanasia program, this murder program. He actually made it public. And that was very courageous in that time, to openly address the Berlin government that they're murderers and that this is injustice. And he did that in 3 sermons, and the strongest, the most important one was on the 3rd of August, 1941. And that's because he later got the, let's say, nickname Lion of Münster, der Löwe von Münster, which is, yeah, depicting a very brave animal. As you can see, that was a brave thing to do. Now, later, the secretary of von Galen wrote about this. What effect did that sermon have? And he writes, and I'm not going to read all of this. You can maybe, if it's recorded, feel free to read it. The 3 sermons were like a beacon. Yeah, it was not only known in Germany, but also got known all over Europe. That there was one guy in Germany that held speeches, that held sermons against the Nazi regime, and that he was so brave that, that it got well known. And of course, there was no internet, no Instagram or something, so you had to really copy it by hand or from typewriter to typewriter. And to quote the last sentence here, it was not uncommon for copies to be buried like a precious treasure, to keep them out of the hands of the Gestapo, which is short for Geheime Staatspolizei. So it's like a political police, which is in a dictatorship existence, that they pursue people that are against the government. So there's a strong historic evidence that these sermons were really stirring up the communities, and people were brave and distributed them. And we set up an escape room experience on top of that. On the left side, that's me. As you can see, on the right side, his name is Winfried Hachmann. And in 2018, we founded a little company. We're self-employed. And we have this mobile educational escape room. And here's our logo, our poster, Der Löwe von Münster. And we tour throughout Germany to set it up in schools. I'll show you what it looks like. Well, there's photos in the next slides. Just give you the storyline in advance. Within the escape room, we put the players, so that's students from the age 14 upwards. It's not suitable for 10-year-olds or younger students because it's some intense storyline, of course, and there's serious background about these murder programs. But we put them in the role of scouts from 1941. The group leader, Karl Kortenkamp, has made copies of this bishop's sermon. Karl is a fictional character, but he might really well have been existed. He might have been living in these days, and he's keeping now these leaflets in his study, maybe to distribute it later. And now the game starts. We enter the room, and he himself was arrested by the Gestapo that morning. The players have to find the leaflets before the Gestapo search the house for evidence. And of course, in 1 hour's time, the favorite time limit for escape rooms, we use that as well. Now, I give you some real photos here. That is how it looks like from the interior side. We have theater constructions. There are mobile walls that we set in a square, a rectangle. They're quite flexible. We can make a little bit longer, a bit shorter. We have all these scenery from the time. We have a radio, we have a projector, we have a typewriter, which you can't see in that photo, but all kinds of equipment that was really from that time. So we looked on what eBay and some sources to really buy this stuff. Yeah, we tried to set up this study room here from 1941. This is one of our promotional photos, which is really nice and covering the scenery that we see so often, that I see from on my laptop. Of course, we have, like in a professional, firmly constructed escape room, like a back office room where I have monitors to watch on the cameras what's going on in the room. And that's quite exactly my perspective that I have on the room here. There's at maximum 8 students working in that escape room, trying to actually get to these leaflets of the sermon before they get caught. And so how does it look like from the outside? Well, this is not in a classroom, but it's an installation in, well, it's a shopping mall that was it wasn't operational anymore. Anyway, we were allowed to use that shopping mall, ex-shopping mall, to set it up, and I quite like the atmosphere here, and you can see the whole construction. Yeah, that is how it's looked like. It's covered, so it's not there's not so much light inside. We can also set this atmosphere always to the right tone. And okay, next slide. Well, what's happening then? Of course, we have all the riddles and puzzles. I will not go into details what's happening. You should use the telephone, you should use the projector, write something on the typewriter, read actually the sermon, which is, well, there's some notes on the sermon, what's the basic content of the sermon, use that for some puzzles. But the dilemma here is, well, it's set up slowly. During the course of the game, they must call Carl's friends and family for clues. So on the other end of the line, I am in the back office and I have my headset on and I talk to the players. The computer changes my voice so I can be a female voice or I can be a male voice, younger, older. And they have, there's 2 characters here. First one is Paul. So that's the brother of Carl. And he'll say, well, he gives them some clues, but before he gives clues, he says, well, you guys promise me you'll distribute the leaflets later. It can't all have been in vain. We must finally shed light on the Nazi crimes. Summarized now. And another guy has a different position. He is the guy that's very afraid. He doesn't want to get in touch with the Nazis and put his life in danger. And he says, well, I give you the clues, but promise me that you will destroy the leaflets later. Okay, think of the danger. You want to rescue Carl, don't you? You want to rescue yourself. Don't get caught by the police. Of course, that's not important to solve the puzzles. You can open the final door and you find the leaflets here. And now we go into the reflection later on, which is really important, I think, for all educational escape rooms, that you always have this, this framework of introduction. What's the historic background? Quite as I did now with you in the 2 minutes, give you a historic background. And later on, you discuss about what you just experienced. Now, I ask the students, what would you have done in 1941? Now you have these leaflets of this sermon, and there's the crime publicly written down, all the true details here. What would you do? Would you go distribute it, follow Paul, or would you follow Mr. Küchlein? And he says, well, no, are we going to destroy it? We're not going to talk about it. It's too dangerous. We want to rescue our lives. And that actually puts you in the situation of German people in 1941, because actually to distribute such leaflets is a dangerous undertaking in that time. So we have like a secret voting here. You can place your mark. I have 30 students. We watch the result of the whole class, and well, sometimes it's 50% distributing the leaflets, the copies of the sermon, or it could be 60%. Well, it's sometimes it differs a bit. Here is a typical situation. Well, that was during the Corona crisis, so we all have these nice masks on, but we were lucky that we actually could do some contracts in that time. Here is a typical situation where I discuss the result of the voting and ask the students what's happening here. We then do not want to stop in 1941, because I think for any historic education in school or anywhere else, it's important to say, what do you learn from that? And it's the message here is, well, maybe you can understand what did German people feel in 1941 when, if they wanted to do something against the Nazis, it meant maybe giving his life or giving one's life. It was very dangerous. So, but don't we have the same kind of emotional states, the same question to our consciousness if we see injustice in the world nowadays. So I asked him, what's in your daily life? Maybe spark this thought, ooh, I might interfere here, I might speak up against injustice, but do I really dare? Maybe I'm the only one. I don't like to do it. So it's civil courage that is so necessary in any democracy. But in the end, if it doesn't work nowadays, if people don't speak up against injustice, about discrimination against any kind of minority in the world, or if people get hurt or people get emotionally hurt or whatever you can think of, if we don't speak up against that now, what in a dictatorship like in Germany 80 years ago? Of course, people are so afraid, but if that fear catches us nowadays as well, we have a really problem as a democracy, and we encourage the students to say, like the Bishop von Galen in 1941, maybe take that one step and say, well, I might be courageous now. This time, even if everyone else doesn't speak up, and that was the situation in 1941, even among the people in the church, there was no big group of bishops that really criticizing the Nazi government or something. So he was very alone, the Bishop von Galen. And he nevertheless, he did it because he said, it's my values, it's important, even if I have to give my life, or if it's dangerous, I'll do it. So we can take that to 2023 and the following years. And I think it's very important. Now, I'll give you a quick overview about the procedure. I'm not going to go into details now. This is in German, unfortunately, but let me just say one class of about 24 to maximum 32 students takes up to 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours. We play in terms. Actually, the construction I showed you, we have 2 versions, so it's a duplicate. We bring to schools 2 escape rooms, and in the first hour, or here it's 50 minutes, if you can see, you can read the minutes. 2 groups play. It's like maximum of 16 students. The other one have a parallel program in the classroom, and then after 1 hour we switch groups, and the other, well, we do a reset, of course, and in the physical escape room you have to put all the things back to the positions they were. And then the other 2 groups play, and in the end we have this reflection, which is the Abschlussdiskussion in the classroom, where we do all this voting and discussion and debate about what I just told you. This is just a little image of the parallel program here, what people can do. They can do a quiz, a rally with QR codes on tablets, but that differs. It's also in debate with the school, what they want to do in addition to the escape room. Here you can see one very typical emotional photo here of a group that succeeded. Maybe they didn't even know what history lesson to expect, but certainly not what we offer them. People often go into the classroom and say, wow, you really changed the whole classroom to this 1941 scene. And now they did it. They did whatever, 52 minutes, and they're really happy to have succeeded here. I'll quickly, it's not too much now, but I really want to go to the learning objectives, because we try to have a good foundation here. The main learning objectives here are, first, getting to know the person of Bishop Clemens August Graf von Galen and his work during the National Socialist era. Second, understand or feel the personal conflicts of conscience in a totalitarian state, and then encourage players to speak out against injustice in present everyday life and to show civil courage, even when everyone else is silent. Because now we have the chance, we have the freedom, we have all the opportunities to actually do that. And that is what we can learn from history, that we have to act in the present time. There's a small first scientific analysis, which I just quote. It could be proven that it's a tool for stimulating historical thought processes. A transfer is done in this reenacted historic situation to one's own life world. There is a transfer. And what I really like is the formation of value judgment with regard to one's own behavior in today's individual reality of life. So students not only learn about history, but they also transfer this knowledge and this emotional state to the present time to maybe change one's own behavior in the future. Yeah, that's about it. I have more photos, but maybe later in the discussion Q&A, that would be it for now. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, Matthias. And we're all really clapping for you, I think. Thanks especially for drawing us into that world of your escape room. I felt like we could really access it. And I'm just imagining for students the difference between immersing in the world that you created versus going to a classroom for a typical history lecture. I mean, it's just night and day. So it's really amazing to have a sense of that. Now,
thanks.
No, thank you. And next we'll be hearing from Céline Newbig, who's been working as a scenographer and exhibition designer in museums for over a decade and is studying game design at the Zurich University of the Arts, focusing on escape games. She's also the co-founder of the Swiss company Enigma Immersive, developing interactive adventure games for museums now for 5 years. So over to you, Céline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll try to start my presentation. Let's have a look if this works.
I'll let you know.
Are you seeing
the
presentation? Or are you seeing my...
I see what you see. I think I see your
yes. Yes, I think I will just restart. I'm sorry.
I
also practiced that, but obviously not good enough.
You're fine. You're fine.
Voila. Now you should see.
And while she's doing that, just for the audience, get thinking about your questions for when we move into the Q&A.
So you don't see my notes now, is that right?
Actually, I don't see any screen sharing right now.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Now it's coming on. Yeah, starting. There it is. Perfect.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well done.
Good. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Yes, I want to talk to you about what we could learn from commercial escape rooms. And as Rebecca already said, I'm a co-founder of a company named Enigma, and we are working for museums and developing games in the museum for now 5 years. Here you see an example of this, just that you know in which area we are around. What you see here is an exhibition on archaeology. And the topic was that all the visitors of the exhibition could learn about the different fields of archaeology by practicing and doing stuff, of course, in a very simplified way, but still stuff that you really do when you work in this field. Here you see, sorry, I will just rush over this because 12 minutes. Here you see another game that we did. The topic was a medieval castle, and we tried to make a game that not just looked like it is from the 13th century, but all the materials that are visible for the visitors should also be the real one and everything else. And because to show you that we not just do physical games, that's one of our latest projects. It's about a salt thief in Horgen, and it's a mixture between an app and with augmented reality and physical stations, and you have to solve all the things to have the solution in the end. Who is the thief and why did this all happen? So yeah, I'm also, as Rebecca said, I'm also a game designer at the ZHDK, and I'm researching escape rooms, and that's a very hard job. As you see here, I have this very miserable life to travel around Europe, or even the world, and play the best escape rooms that they are. And then, the not so much fun part is that I have then to analyze them to the depth, so that I find out all the dirty secrets they have, that I find patterns that we could use and reuse them later. So and you will hear talking me a lot about the best 100 escape rooms. Just to mention, there is a list. It's not my list, but if you have played more than 100 rooms, then you're allowed to vote on this list. And if you have played more than 200 rooms, then you're allowed to even nominate rooms in this list. So you have to play. You need to play a lot of rooms to get in there, but then we have this 100 list of the best escape rooms called Terpeka. So look it up if you're in a city. Always a good choice to play one of these rooms. So move on, sorry. We already heard what is an escape room or an escape game. So just quickly, live action team-based game where players discover clues, solve puzzles, and accomplish tasks in one or more rooms in order to accomplish a specific goal in a limited amount of time. That's from Scott Nicholson, who is probably very well known to all of you, but still. So is this still up to date? I would say in the meantime, we are talking more about escape games, not escape rooms, because room is a little bit, as I say here, the spaces are now seen much more openly. So we have chess, we have big halls with 3,000 square meters to play. We have urban fields. So there is a lot going on there in case of room. So that's why escape game is probably better. Even escaping is not still the goal in a lot of the games around the world. So, and the most of the designers try to create an experience with a lot of immersion. And of course, the story is now very important. So in the first generation of escape rooms, often there was just a puzzle and then the next puzzle and the next puzzle going on. But now we are talking about story, immersion. What's your experience? So that's much more important now. And yes, of course, there is mostly still a time limit because you have to book something and you have to plan. But this time limit is not just an hour anymore. We already heard from Helen about the strengths of escape games, so I will just go quickly over it. So for the players, they can shape their own story and they have an active role. And I think that's one important thing you should keep in mind if you're designing educational escape games, so that you have a story where they could really be active in it. Then they get a sense of purpose, urgency, the time limit, and community. They have to tackling challenges together and hopefully increasing confidence by doing so, and also in critical thinking and decision making. They have to learn to keep an eye on the details, and very, very important. So if you never have played an escape room, the one key feature you really have to do is communicate. And maybe it's you that saved the world for your group because your input was this small last step to true success. So maybe changing everything could be amazing. And for us, when we develop escape games with some knowledge that should be transported to the players, the one thing that is really helpful for us is that we know after this whole process what we really want to tell them. So we learn to condense our content to the key messages. And that's a very hard process, but it's amazing in the end. So when we are thinking about educational escape games, when I see not today, obviously, but normally very often, if you look on the Etsy stores or in the internet, then you often get something like that. And that's not bad. That could be a lot of fun. I mean, if I look on this paper, I see a lot of puzzle pieces that are looking very funny, and the story could be great and everything. But I want to show you some pictures from commercial rooms around the world, just that you see why I think that there is maybe a little bit of air between these two areas. So the first one that you see here is from the room in Berlin. And just that you have a feeling of the scenography, the lighting, everything that's going on, all the wonder that's happening here. And the next one is from Hamburg, from Scurilum. Also here, I would say it's more like you just walk in there and you think you are there. So the immersion hits you right in the first moment. That's amazing. Then this one, you don't see a lot because, of course, they don't show you pictures from the inside. But that's in a huge factory hall, and you have to explore the factory hall by your own and find out whatever happened there. So it's a little bit horror, but not too much. It's fun. Also, Hamburg again. They just have picture on their page. Normally you don't see pictures from the inside, so but I love that. That's inside a ship, and that's from Wuppertal. It is called the Dark Forest, also Germany, and they built a whole forest into a hall. So probably you're telling me now, yeah, of course, but I want to do an educational escape game. I don't have the time to do light, and I don't have the time to do sound and special effects. I don't have actors and anything like that, and I understand that. But I think there is a in-between. So let's get inspired from this kind of escape games and then adapt what we could use. So if you have light bulbs that you could change by an app, the color of the light bulbs, or a flickering effect or something like that. Or if you have just small music boxes that you can put around in the corner of your room or your space, or your digital interface, just think about what could build up an atmosphere more than just the things that are on the table or on the screen. I think that's the important things. So what should you think about when you plan an escape game? You should think about, and that sounds very obviously, but it isn't. You should think about the conditions you couldn't change. So if that is a digital game or an analog game, there are always things that you couldn't change. Maybe the room size, maybe the emergency exits, maybe the cleaning stuff that goes going through, maybe the server environment you're building on, so on, so on. Just, you can't change them, so have them on your map. You should think about flow, and I'm not talking about today about the flow channel. Look it up. It's a very great talk about flow and how you can achieve that. But I mean also the flow of the players during the game. So how they come in, how they are during the game, and how they get out. Which leads us to this one. You should think about the dramaturgy and a difficulty curve during your game. And of course, storyline, very important. It's not just a puzzle hunt. Just, I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just, it's more. You're building an escape room. You have to have a story. You have to build something. So game flow means bring them in a nice start. Think about how you could bring them into the game. How would you talk to them? Maybe you have this historical talk that Matthias said in the beginning so that they know in which time they are. Maybe it's the music, maybe it's the smell, something like that. How do you bring them in? Then the first 1 or 2 puzzles are tutorial puzzles. So they should learn how you think as a puzzle designer. They should learn what are the rules in this game. They are easy. Make them as easy as possible so that they should just learn how this thing is working. And if you have a difficult puzzle in your game, then make it short after the middle of your gaming time, because then they still have energy left. They're still very motivated, but they're also very confident about that. They think they know already how it works. So bring it on then. And then towards the end, the puzzle becomes easier. They should become easier. And as Matthias already said, you need a debriefing in the end if you do an educational escape room. You have to talk about the experience, you have to talk about the learning outcomes, and then there is where the learning happens also. So that's very important. Just to show you, these are the dramaturgy of 3 very famous rooms. And as you see here, the highest emotional peak, so when we were as happy as possible or as afraid as possible, is never right in the end. It's shortly before the end. But you try to raise the emotion shortly before the end and then release your players in the afternoon. And also it's not always one line. It is up and down, like in the normal storytelling. It's not rocket science. If you read something about storytelling and the 3-arc system, that's also something that's happening if you're telling a story in an escape game. But I hear very often from beginners that they want to have a tension curve that is always like here, and that's not possible, and also very annoying for the players because they need rest time during this. Yes, so puzzle design. You should think about what is the learning outcome because you're creating an educational escape room. No outside knowledge is needed, at least if it is not a test. You could use an educational escape room, of course, as a test, as an exam. Then they need the knowledge they already learned, but otherwise, no outside knowledge. The puzzle should be fair. That sounds very obvious, but often they aren't, so they should be solvable. And they should be solvable without requiring hints from the game master. So not from the outside, only clues in the room. And just for you as a measurement, about if you let it play testing, then they should have 5 minutes to solve it. That's perfect. And yeah, it is testing. And if you think this, when you think at your players solving your puzzle, then it's a very bad puzzle. Redo it, please, again. It's not you against the players. You're here to help them. You're here to create a great experience for them. So that's not the goal. I will go over this quickly. These are other projects from my company just to show you how they could look, but that is not that important. I will just tell you shortly about puzzle types that you could keep in mind that I have analyzed by analyzing these rooms. Of course, there are executing tasks. There very often you see that in good escape rooms. So you have to do a task. You have to find something different, unusual in the space. You have to do physical challenges, find stuff, following instructions, role play. So now very often you have actors in a room, and that's great. Or you have something on the phone, that's also role play. Dexterity challenges, communication, when you are not have the same informations. So somebody sees something and the other person sees something else, and then they have to talk to each other. Narrative elements, assigning, so color to objects, senses and logicals. I hope that's the correct English word. I'm not sure about this, but it's like Paul is sitting next to Anna, and Anna has a hamster. So what does Paul have? So this kind of puzzle. They're great for educational escape games. Putting stuff together, math and logical puzzles, please don't do them. That's just me, sorry. Recognizing anomalies, organize stuff, decoding, and counting. And the last one is memorizing. And I put them in this order because I have looked how often they are in escape games. In this escape games I analyzed. And as you see here, this stuff here, from the math puzzle onwards, are nearly not there. But they are very often in educational escape games. We see very often the coding stuff going on, counting letters where you have to find out, oh, I have to read only the red letters or something like that. Also math and logical and memorizing puzzle and counting. They're very often there. But if you look at the world's best escape rooms, they're not in the rooms. And I think that's something we should think about when we are creating. Because sorry, that's just as you see, and not even there are these 3 types, because we try to create games that are for many different peoples, and just a small input really in the end. Sorry, I'm already way over time. You have to think about different player types if you're designing your escape room. So your group that are designing shouldn't be all the same persons who like all the same stuff, so that you have a lot of different puzzle types. And in the end, if you want to make a test which kind of player type you are, there is a test. So maybe we could load that in the end then. So that was for me. Thank you very much. Sorry for
amazing. Celine, that was so amazing. And I think I love your point that, many of us as educators, depending on our situation, whether we're in a classroom setting or what, we might think, oh my gosh, there's no way I could ever build something like those commercial escape rooms. But I think what you really did for us is you showed us how we could just think a little bit more broadly about what could be possible and just picking little elements. And also, I love being in the presence of someone who's done literally hundreds, I'm guessing, or thousands of escape rooms around the world. It's amazing to hear you identify for us the patterns that you've seen across different games, and even to almost provide the beginnings of a sort of toolkit for those of us who might be thinking of building prototypes. So although we are running over time, I'm sure the audience will agree with me. I'm just loving the presentation, so I'm letting them roll because they're so informative and rich. So thank you again, Celine. That was amazing.
Thank you. Okay,
and now last of our physically or virtually present, Tim Peacock says very much so, yes. I was going to say last of our physically present, but of course we're all in Zoom. But of course we have Kurt Jervich, who's a professor of environmental policy and planning in Center for Earth and Environmental Science at the State University of New York. And I think he's currently in Scandinavia. Yes, he's on research sabbatical, splitting time between the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University and the University of Uppsala's Games and Society Lab. Kurt designs role-play games and puzzle quests that engage participants in critical thinking about social, ecological systems and the future of cities. Amazing, Kurt, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Rebecca. Can you all see my presentation and hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for being here. And I'm going to talk today about puzzle quests, which are a bit different from the escape rooms that we've been hearing about, although very similar in some other ways. And those that I'm going to talk about are specifically about sustainability and resilience thinking, because I am an environmental and urban planner, which means I think about how to create sustainable cities and how to help residents of cities be involved in the planning process in the cities where they live. So there's a little bit about me in classes that I teach, but I'll cruise around that. Essentially, I think about social ecological systems. These are kind of what I research and what I teach about, and the space where I am creating games. Social ecological systems are just the kind of interconnected social, environmental, and economic systems that both create environmental challenges in cities and through modification or adaptation of them are kind of pathways to manage or resolve our big environmental problems. So in that social space, we have things like culture and politics and media, and in the environmental space, air and water and geology and plants and animals and things. And then in the economic space, it's about markets and supply and demand and how we use natural resources. Those three things kind of interact to create what I call social ecological systems. And that's kind of where I work. But the games that I am playing right now and the games that I am creating right now that teach about those social ecological systems are on the Questo app, which is not an app I created. It's created by other folks, but these are outdoor escape rooms or outdoor escape games where you walk around cities and you solve puzzles that are embedded in the architecture and the urban landscape around you. And so they may be puzzles that ask you to look at street signs and find similarities or differences that you can then piece together into a code. Or you may be presented with a lockbox and the code to the lockbox is embedded on address numbers that you find on the street or something like that. The Questo app is interesting because they've got games in 280 cities, 400 different games, and they have made their game creation tool kind of open source. And so anybody can create Questo puzzle quests, which makes them super interesting because they're not all created by professional game designers. So I would say about 95% of the games on the Questo app are kind of traditional recreation and entertainment focused games. Harry Potter in Edinburgh and Romantic Barcelona, Christmas games, things like that. Those are fun to play. They're fun if you're out for an afternoon with your friends or family and want to hang out in the city and walk around a bit and stop and get some ice cream and drinks along the way, something like that. But the puzzle quests that I am interested in on the Questo app are a bit different. There's a group of game designers that are creating games that are actively about social change. And the games that I create are social change in that they are about developing sustainability and resilience in cities. So just to give you a flavor of what some of the games are like, some of these kind of alternative games are like on the Questo app. So Martin Luther King Jr. in Atlanta, down in the bottom right-hand corner, is about the neighborhood where Martin Luther King Jr. grew up and where he kind of developed his philosophy of nonviolent civil protest and kind of ascended to leadership of the civil rights movement in the United States. And as you play the game, you not only learn about Martin Luther King Jr., but you are forced to kind of reconcile the key moral conflict at the heart of his movement, which was how to maintain nonviolent civil protest in the face of violence. And so it's kind of a game about a really interesting question. After the Wall, Berlin, back to 1989, Germany, is a puzzle quest that tours different protest sites from East and West Germany in 1989 that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall. You visit the protest sites, you learn about the people that were central to launching those protests and the courageous things that they did. And then London LGBTQ Detective Mystery is a tour of important sites to the LGBTQ community in London. I haven't had a chance to play Street Art and Resistance in Rome yet, so I don't know much about it. But what I find super interesting is that these games are all created by just residents of the cities where they occur. Julia Byrne, who created the Martin Luther King Jr. game in Atlanta, created it when she was a college student and she just needed a little bit of extra spending cash. So when you launch a game on the Questo app and you get 50 gameplays and have, I think, a certain average rating out of the kind of 5-star Yelp kind of scoring system that they have, then Questo starts giving you a percentage of the revenue that your game generates. So it's not a lot, but it helped Julia get through college. So I find these interesting because anyone can create them, and they are about topics that are kind of less traditional for entertainment and recreation escape rooms. So the most recent game that I created is called Sabotage, Prevent Sustainability Sabotage with the Planet Protectors. And the premise of the game is that you are a covert operative for the Planet Protectors, which is a kind of black ops agency within the United Nations that's charged with protecting the planet from those that are trying to do it harm. And so this is a AI generated image of what I think you look like when you're playing the game. And it takes place in a neighborhood in Stockholm that I'll tell you a little more about in just a second. What you see here, the image on the left, is if you are looking at Questo on your computer, this is how it looks. And if you are using the phone app, which you need to do when you play the games, this is what you would see. So when you're playing the phone app, you can see up in the upper left-hand corner, 1 out of 14. My quest has 14 puzzles. There's a clock that keeps track of how quickly you're completing the quest. And then the lightning bolt, you get points each time you complete a puzzle. And you kind of tick through the app as you walk around the neighborhood, solving the different puzzles that are embedded in the story. So my puzzle quest, Sustainability Sabotage, takes place in what's called Stockholm's Royal Seaport, which is an old industrial neighborhood in Stockholm. It was the site of Stockholm's original oil refinery and gas depot. And so large shipping vessels were bringing oil into Stockholm. That oil was used to heat and electrify the city. The neighborhood was entirely demolished in the early 2000s. And then it has been kind of reimagined and reborn as a sustainable community. And it has received lots of awards from the United Nations and architectural associations for its innovative sustainable design. So the next, I'm going to show a little video. This is when you play Sabotage, Sustainability Sabotage, and you first get on site and you turn your app on. The app is geo-located, and so when you walk over the locations of the different puzzles, your phone does things. And so this is the video that plays when you initially kind of enter the game, and hopefully gets you into the flow state that Celine talked about. So we'll see if this video plays for us.
Agent Green, Agent Green. This is Planet Protector's headquarters. Agent Green, we do not see your body cam footage. Please clear body cam footage. There we go. Thank you, Agent Green. Agent Green, you are on site at the Stockholm Royal Seaport. Your mission today is to conduct an inspection of sustainability assets at the seaport site. As you know, this is one of Europe's most important sustainable development locations and communities. We have a United Nations delegation on site tomorrow for a tour of sustainability assets. Please inspect the locations on your checklist for safety and security for tomorrow's delegation. Thank you. Over.
So hopefully that played okay for everybody. So the premise of the game is that you are the planet protector and you are to secure the different sustainability assets in the Stockholm Royal Seaport for this delegation of United Nations VIPs that's coming tomorrow. And then things kind of go haywire and nutty along the way, and you have to solve some additional puzzles that you didn't plan on in order to prevent sabotage. You can kind of see the neighborhood in the image at the bottom of the screen. And I'm just going to point out some of the sustainability assets so that you know the kinds of things that I'm talking about. First, well, I guess, can you all see my mouse as I point things out on my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So what I'm circling right here is an old, what's called a gas klocka, which is an old structure that held gas or fuel as it was being stored to produce electricity and energy. There's kind of a skeleton gas klocka that you have to solve a puzzle at the beginning of the game. You see these big round buildings, which are those that still have the outside facade on them. These were built in the late 1800s. They're like real architectural masterpieces, and now they're being turned into hotels and concert venues. But those are still there, and so they give they kind of set the context that this was once an industrial site. You see another gas klocka. It's a big white ball, a sphere in the kind of middle of the picture, and you can see it in the video on the upper right-hand side. That's a more modern gas klocka that held natural gas for producing energy. On the tops of some of the buildings, you can see green roofs. These retain stormwater and filter stormwater before it goes into the river that runs along the northern edge of the community. All of these buildings have solar panels on top of them. The community actually produces more energy than it uses. It's got really great green space. They've restored the landscape along the side of the river. And then what you see on the left, you see some big boats and things. There's kind of remnants of the industrial site. And then that's the Baltic Sea off on the left-hand corner of the picture. I haven't shown you all of the locations of puzzles in the quest because at some point in your lives, you're all going to come to Stockholm and you'll be able to play it. So I didn't want to give away all the puzzles. But these are some of the different location sites. And I can play another video here and you can see what some of the puzzles are like. So I'll play this upper left-hand corner puzzle. Well, actually, I'll play the right-hand corner puzzle, and then because that goes with the next slide. So here we go. This is the second puzzle in the game where things start to go a little bit nutty for your character.
Agent Green, this is Planet Protector's headquarters. Thanks for being at the hill on the double. Listen, this is highly unusual. We have received what appears to be an anonymous email threat against tomorrow's United Nations delegation. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. Hopefully you can make something of it there on the ground. This appears to be in the form of some sort of a diabolical riddle or puzzle. Look, the best I can think to do is just to read this to you, and hopefully you can make some meaning of it. Here we go. The email reads, you go about your lives convinced of your purity. You ignore the signs, the failure of your currency. Your SDGs are false comfort, nothing but tricks and lies. Look around and above. We are the blank blank. Tomorrow's tour is doomed. Call it off or else. If that means any.
So I'll just pause there. So you get to the second puzzle, you think that you're checking out these different sustainability assets and find now that there's kind of a terror threat against the VIPs that are visiting tomorrow. You have a riddle to solve that helps lead the way on resolving who's making the threat and what to do about it. I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide in the interest of time. I'm not going to play that video. So what you see here on the next page are the kind of behind the scenes of the Questo app and how the puzzle creation works. Well, first, over on the far left is what you would see on your phone when you get to that location and have to resolve the puzzle. So you can see in the upper left, you're at puzzle 2 out of 14. The video that we just watched plays when you get to the right location. And then you get the kind of poem riddle and have a space to type in your answer, and then it tells you if you're correct or not. The answer to the puzzle is 6 eyes. So you can see the last 2 lines of the poem read, your SDGs, which are Sustainable Development Goals, are false comfort, nothing but tricks and lies. Look around and above, we are the 6 eyes. And when you're standing in that location where the puzzle plays, if you look around on the building to your left is this sculpture embedded in the wall where you see the 6 eyes, which would hopefully tip you off that that rhymes with the line in the puzzle that comes, or line in the poem that comes before. Then in the middle of the slide, you see the kind of puzzle creation and editing tools that you have in Questo. And what I really want to stress here is that anyone can use these tools. If you use social media at all, if you teach and have a classroom management system that you use, if you create online quizzes or tests for students, the Questo app works very much in the same way. And it's very simple to use. The administrators at Questo, if you have questions along the way, they will help you navigate the editing tool. They will help you design your puzzles if you get stuck. And they'll give you feedback on the whole game when you're all finished. So they're really great. The next puzzle I wanted to show, just so I can show you some of the different puzzle types that are embedded in the Questo app that you have the capability to use. So the last one, you can just enter text. You could enter numbers for a code or something like that. The app has 6 or 7 different puzzle varieties that are built in. But if you're a little bit creative, you can kind of figure out how to hack those templates to do more interesting things with them. So puzzle 11 out of 14 puts you in front of the recycling center in the center of the neighborhood. And when you get to the right location, you're looking at these 3 different recycling units that you can see in the images: the Restifal unit, the Plastverpackingnar, and the Tidningnar. Tidningnar is newspaper recycling, yellow is the plastic recycling, and the rest of your trash is the gray. So what I've done in this puzzle is what you see in the app when you get to the right location is you just see the symbols that are in that kind of second image: the recycling symbol, the waste symbol, and the newspaper symbol. And those are out of order from the order that the recycling units are facing you when you're standing looking at them. And then in the app, you have the different color-coded receptacles. And the idea is that you match up the different symbols with the color that they correspond with, and you put them in the right order, put those images in the right order. So you can click on the little blue circles and they'll say 1, 2, or 3. You put them in the right order, and that's how you solve the puzzle. I've got some examples of some other puzzles here that maybe if we have time a little bit later or there's a question about, we could look at, but in the interest of time, I will zip by the videos and just tell you about them. One of the final puzzles of the game, there are these plaques posted on the sides of buildings in the historic center of the Royal Seaport neighborhood. You're given this kind of sketched out map with the dots that illustrate the 3 buildings that are situated there at the center. One of them is now a School of Communication, a university building. One is full of cafes and bars and restaurants, and the other is a museum. The dots on the map represent where these different plaques are located on the sides of the buildings. And if you go and locate all 7 of the plaques, you can then put them in order using the numbers that are on the top. And the code that you then have to enter is the corresponding left and right arrows. So once you put them in order here, they'd be 50, 63, and 76. So what you enter in as a code is left, left, right. That then helps you resolve the final puzzle, which is about who is sabotaging the United Nations Sustainability Tour. And you can alert authorities so they get the right people on site to help prevent the sabotage. And then the final puzzle is a thank you note from the Secretary General of the United Nations, who sends you an encoded message. That's the image in the upper left. Agent Green, I'm grateful for your work today. This is a reminder of the vision that Stockholm Royal Seaport tries to achieve. The environment is where we, and then you get blank, 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 and blank with these symbols in the bottom. The app then gives you this image of the symbols, and where you're standing when you receive this puzzle is looking over a playground that has the alphabet painted on the pavement. And you can match the symbols in the code up against the letters in the alphabet. And what you learn is that the blank, 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 the full quote is, the environment is where we live, work, and play, which is a famous quote by an environmental activist named Dana Alston that teaches us that the environment is not only beautiful spaces and mountain landscapes and wilderness areas, but it's also our cities and communities and the places where we work, where we live, work, and play. This is the final ending video, which lets you know that you're going to remain anonymous because you're a covert agent, but the world thanks you, though they'll never know about your work today. So I'm interested in the connection between urban planning and sustainability, and how games and puzzle quests can achieve improved planning outcomes. For me, urban planning is thinking about the graceful development of cities and towns and regions so that our inhabitants can meet their personal, family, and community goals. Sustainability is about achieving those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And I'm hoping to achieve improved planning outcomes, making our cities sustainable, effective, equitable, inclusive, and enjoyable places to live. So I'm curious about how puzzle quests help sustainability and urban planning professionals build certain sustainability competencies. And this guy, Armin White, has developed a list of competencies that sustainability professionals should have. They're systems thinking, anticipatory thinking, values thinking, strategic and interpersonal and integrative thinking. These are skills that people working in sustainability and urban planning are supposed to be good at in order to be good at our jobs. And I'm curious if puzzle quests help us develop those competencies. And I'm trying to build puzzle quests that do that. So that's my work and a bit about the puzzle quests that I've been working on.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kurt. And I think
Sure.
What's incredible about the work you're sharing with us is at one moment, it's totally impressive. And I'm just blown away by what it is you're doing. And at the same time, you've made it accessible for us by walking us through step by step how someone, even with a more basic skill set, might be able to start engaging with something like the Questo app. And so I think that's a real amazing feat as well, to make it approachable. And also, it seems really relevant to me right now. I have some colleagues and we're all teaching on climate change and security and climate issues. And we're finding this to be like truly existential, anxiety inducing stuff for our students. And the idea of turning some of the issues into more of a caper and sort of giving agency around being an agent, a covert agent, and going on a quest. I love that idea, and sort of having a hero's journey when students might be feeling like they don't have control or any power. So I could also see from a student perspective how something like this is also, kind of amazing. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad that was recorded so that I can just verbatim drop that into the conclusion section of the next paper presentation or something. That was really eloquent, Rebecca. Thank you.
Well, and everyone should play his game on Questo so we can put Kurt through college again, right? Matt's working in the shipping industry and leadership, and he's looking specifically at how we can use the escape room model to teach DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think many people on the call are interested in this issue. So you can email me from where you got the Zoom link and I'll share Matt's longer presentation. Thanks, Tim.
Many thanks, and many thanks to everyone so far. It's been really stimulating to hear about the very different work in everything from breaking into the worm government through to these powerful retellings of history and the ethical challenges, the moral challenges associated with that in escape rooms, right the way to Agent Green and mountain climbing and so many different and of course the creativity in the various different forms. You don't need to be a full-scale production company in order to immerse people, and I think it's fantastic to have this range of disciplinary perspectives. And in Games and Gaming Lab, we've been delighted to work with Rebecca and with colleagues in School of Law, whether it's in peace gaming or in games around marriage law, and delighted to be co-hosting this. Games and Gaming Lab itself is cross-disciplinary, staff members from astrophysics to veterinary medicine who in some way or another are engaged in games. And for us, it's been everything from tabletop wargaming with potential policymakers, flooding the city of Glasgow and having people react as decision makers, responding to the crisis. We nearly did it during COP26, but we're advised that might not be in the best of spirits while all those decision makers were there to even virtually flood the city, to building Minecraft versions of Robert Burns's farm, working with Robert Burns's farm. And so, Games and Gaming Lab, we try to help people make their ideas fly like bicycles. And thanks again. Back over to Rebecca.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. And it's great to have you with us today. Thanks for co-hosting. And I'm just seeing in the chat, some people are asking for the email addresses of the presenters. And if people don't catch that today, I'm happy to circulate a message to everyone sharing contacts as well. So I think I have Matt's video working. So I'll just quickly, I'm going to share screen and jump over to it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Offord.
Can I just check, can you hear that?
Yes, yes, that was working.
I'm a senior lecturer in leadership and management education at the Adam Smith Business School. And I've recorded this short video to show you a practical example of how we can use digital educational escape rooms. And in this case, it's for maritime education, which will obviously be different to your context, but hopefully this will show how these games can be deployed. I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person, but hopefully this video will suffice to give you a bit of a show around how this would work. Before I show you the space that we created, the Digital Educational Escape Room, I'll just give you a little bit of context around this. So I first started developing educational escape rooms in 2020, working with undergraduates on digital literacy skills. So as you probably are aware, educational escape rooms are a sequential series of puzzles. And the players are effectively trapped within a room or a scenario situation, and they have to escape from that situation by solving a puzzle, and then they move on to the next game and so on, and ultimately they collect enough clues to solve the meta puzzle at the end. And it's just a way of gamifying learning, which is particularly useful for problem-based learning. So we had the problem of digital literacy. So the puzzles that we set were based on learning how to use specific technologies to solve certain problems and so on. That was with a games-based learning group. And I published that work with colleagues in a subtle journal. And at that point, our little group kind of more or less dispersed. Because they were all busy on other projects. But I wanted to take the educational escape room further, and then I bumped into a former colleague of mine working in the shipping industry, and his company they do leadership and management training, but within that they do diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And he was looking for a way to make that more interesting, because at that time it was really based on how they learn their policies. So basically it was basically a PowerPoint session of about an hour, which went through the company DEI policy, which was very dry and not particularly memorable. So we created an escape room, and we based it on a marine accident. So the idea is that a ship has had an accident, and the players are members of a marine accident investigation team. They have to explore the reasons why this accident has happened, and it transpires that the reason this accident has happened is due to D, E, and I causes. Specifically, the ship has a crew of mixed gender, mixed cultures, languages, religions, and so on. And simply some groups weren't talking to other groups, information is lost, and there is an accident. So the escape room is kind of designed, safety is really important to seafarers, so we hooked it onto safety as something that would engage them. They go into the first room and they explore the direct causes of the accident. They have to read witness statements. That will allow them to actually escape the room, but in the next room they go into more policy, and they look at where the breaches of policy are, the company policy, which you'll see we've sort of broken down into more digestible chunks, and then finally they have to figure out what somebody should have done about this, which was to speak up about the issue in the first place, and that allows them to escape the third room. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to share my screen and show you how this works. Okay, so this is Educational Escape Room 1. Don't worry too much about the detail. What I'll just say at the moment was that we prototyped this game. We started off using Microsoft OneNote. We tried doing it on Excel spreadsheets. We tried doing it on Google Docs. So we had a lot of text-based versions of this. We prototyped it in Manila, Mumbai, Ghana. Eventually I got funding, and I used the funding to subscribe to this educational platform, which is called Frame VR, to create a digital, much more immersive kind of 3D environment. We prototyped the game again, and we tried it in Gdansk in Poland, and then we've gone on to try it again in Manila and Ghana, Kochi in India as well. So we've extensively tested this game, and I think this is the thing about educational escape rooms, is that you can use that sort of game design philosophy of prototyping and iterating your different games. So this is Escape Room 1. This will be where.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is the rest of the video is the actual demo. So I'm going to, once the chat is going, I'm going to put the video link and the password in so anyone at home can watch that. But I didn't want to leave us without time for questions. And I think what's amazing about the way Matt and his team have put together that game is basically they're showing how high the stakes can be for DEI issues in the workplace. And what they figured out is that if they wanted to capture the attention of people involved in shipping, a safety hook was the way to do it, because there's such concern about safety and security amongst seafarers. So they used that to kind of get immediate attention and then almost to smuggle in all of the DEI issues that then become essential for solving the game. And if for people interested in watching it, it has a really interesting way of teaching policy and actually having hard copies of company policies on the physical desk in front of people, while they're also using their phone to engage in the 3D immersive digital platform as well. So it's a really interesting way in a workplace setting, I think, of doing education around policy and DEI. And so I'll pop those links and people can email me as well if you don't catch it here. And so I'd like to open it up. I'm going to stop the recording now.